atheists are all agnostics. So if there's anybody that wants to kind of talk about their position and identify themselves, I'll just make some quick notes right now, just for later. I know we've got a big group, but I think Arvind was saying that he's an atheist. So I could take that down. And I think, Garrett, you're going to be like spiritual tonight.
I'm spiritual every day because that's kind of where logic has led me. But I would go ahead.
Sorry, also a small correction. Like, I mean, I would still be on the side of spirituality, but not necessarily God. So when I say like atheism, like not necessarily like
that's cool. Yeah.
Identifying like someone as scared of God, but I think like the spiritual journey, like whatever like we think as like internal, that should still exist. So I guess that's a line that I'm drawing.
Cool. That's great, Arvind. And also to Alice's point, I would love for people to write in the chat, like whether you're atheist, agnostic, spiritual, or religious. And that way Ellis can try to, when we have questions, we're going to let people, if we've heard, from some groups and not others, we're going to prioritize hearing from all groups. From the groups that we haven't heard from, so we get a diversity of opinions. Because
I can't chat because I have dialed in. So yeah, you're gonna have to take down my responses. In another way.
Oh, you can tell us if you want.
Oh, I'm definitely a non-believer. Definitely do not subscribe to any religion. I was raised Catholic, but honestly, even as a child, I struggled to believe in it.
Got it.
And I haven't been going to mass since I was like 10 or 11 years old. I'm definitely in the atheist category.
Atheist.
Oh, and
okay,
sorry,
great.
what's your name?
That's what I was about to
Agatha.
About the value of our brains, especially in the nature of the work that KPMG does, the value of rest and recovery. And so what, as a leader, are you doing to promote that? Are role modeling
I don't think that person is Miriam. I don't know if
Sorry. I know something went on. I'm removing myself from the source.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
That's okay. So we have a bunch of hands up, but we're also at 7 o'clock. But let me try to hit some of the hands, and then we'll go into sort of like what we're gonna do. We'll have like a little bit of presentation, and then we'll have conversation in addition to a little bit of presentation. So we're gonna do probably a little bit of presentation and then a lot of sort of conversation. Daniel, do you want to speak next? And Ellis, your hand is still up. I don't know if you still had something to say. If not, go ahead and put your hand down.
I wouldn't mind introducing myself. I'm a little different here, I guess, and I enjoy the differences, the kind of rubbing against one another. I come from a Jewish background. I became a Zionist, lived in Israel for 3 years. I became a nihilist. And it was in Israel where I began to search for God through my own traditions, wasn't able to find him. Some years later, I was bleeding to death from a horrible chainsaw injury, and I had an encounter that changed my life. I encountered Jesus, so now I'm a Christian.
Cool. Thanks, Daniel.
I'm sorry to interject, but it's kind of ironic that you say that because Jews in Israel tend to be very secular compared to American Jews.
Well, there's two types of Jews in Israel, right? There are the secular Jews, which were the historical European Jews that came over, and now the predominant numbers of Jews are the very religious Jews. But Daniel, you can tell me if I'm wrong about that, but that was my understanding from.
It's I think the religious Jews rate about 15%, and it's pretty similar to here. The great majority of Jews in Israel are either agnostic or atheistic.
And there are a lot of, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but it's my understanding that like the vast majority of them are actually immigrants from Russia, and they were raised under communism, and that's like a system that has no religion in it whatsoever. So they, they came from the Soviet Union, so they'd be secular for that reason alone.
I think that has a real influence. In fact, many Jews came to Israel as Marxists, and many of them formed the kibbutzim. And I naively, I'd spent time on a number of Marxist kibbutzim, but I wasn't aware of it. I wasn't aware of it at the time, but people shared, all the food, the duties. At least that was the ideal. It didn't work out that way, though.
Great, thanks, Daniel. David, you have your hand up. Do you want to share something before we get started?
Logic has led me to be an atheist.
Cool. Logic has led me in a different direction, so we should share logic and listen to each other with an open mind and see if we can learn from each other. So
I did. Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't lose anything to a chainsaw, so I didn't have any sort of experience to change me.
Everybody needs a chainsaw.
At least once in their life.
My grandfather had a chainsaw accident too, so yeah, that wasn't good. But he luckily managed through it. David, you have your hand up. David Cernum.
Sure. Yeah, hi. So I wrote down in the chat that I'm like a traditional Jewish point of view with an intellectual and dialectical education on top of that. And that I think talking about the particulars of the historical context of what group of people currently is doing what weird things, and the Russians who knew nothing about Judaism coming over, or with being drawn into extreme. That's we're going to hit this as we talk about religion. What is centrally, normally, what is religion as self-defined, and really, what does it mean to be religious? I think religious people have to define what it means, because someone defining what it is to be religious who isn't religious, it's like someone who doesn't understand science saying what a scientist is. And, you go into a lab, you do this, and it happens. No, that's not the way science works. So just want to put that guard up. And my basic education is entirely science and logic. So that's where I come from.
Cool, thanks. Daniel Klein.
Yeah, hi. I'm an atheist, and also come from a very extremely religious background. But I'm wondering if, from one Daniel to another Daniel, if you don't mind sharing you said you had an encounter in the experience and how that operated and convinced you. So I'm not, just to say I had an encounter, I don't know what that means. So what exactly happened, and what convinced you that Jesus is a deity or whatever?
Well, thanks for asking.
You don't mind, you don't have to answer if it's too personal.
No, I'd be glad to.
Daniel's a super open, honest guy. He'll share. So, and thank you for that, Daniel. Daniel and I are friends, so I always like listening to his perspective.
I had a terrible chainsaw injury. I was bleeding to death, and I started saying the Shema. The Shema is a prayer that Jews say before they're going to die. I thought I was finished. And suddenly I realized I was out, in the country by myself. And suddenly I realized I wasn't alone. I realized that God was there. I realized he loved me. He was going to take care of me. Even if I died, he would be there for me. And I was ecstatic. The only thing that mattered anymore for me was finding out the truth of who this God is. But I had one fear, even though I was bleeding to death. I had a fear that this had something to do with Jesus. And after searching for a while, because I vowed that I would search until I found out the truth. And I was interested in these things before, but I don't think I really wanted the truth. I wanted what felt right to me. And that's very myopic and subjective. And so this was the first time I wanted the truth. I wasn't going to leave any stone unturned. And I was miraculously rescued. And so the searching led me to Jesus.
May I interject something?
Sure.
Living in the Middle East, in an area of the world that's populated by Muslims, this position must not make you very popular.
Oh, well, while I was in Israel, I didn't become a Christian. It was only after I returned several years later that I had this terrible chainsaw injury. We were part of the Back to the Land movement, the tune on, turn on, drop out movement. And so I was far away from any Jewish community, Muslim community, anything like that. And so it was, I wasn't having any spiritual influence at the time.
Thanks, Daniel, for sharing.
So-
And Ellis has her hand up. Ellis,
I was just gonna follow up, okay, I mean, I was gonna follow up, so why Jesus? Okay, let's say God,
Yeah.
why wouldn't God be sufficient? And how do you get to Jesus specifically?
Well,
Because
for me,
where I'm coming from, and I get, I love debating these things and discussing it. The whole concept doesn't make sense to me. God, I have difficulty with God, never mind Jesus, but God to me is also a ridiculous concept. So, or not, it's very hard to accept the concept. It doesn't explain or help much. So how is Jesus more than God?
I think it's highly logical, but getting back to, what does Jesus contribute that God doesn't? And so the answer is it's not my pragmatic analysis of how much I get out of Jesus. I was for the first time in my life on a search for the truth. And that led me to Jesus. I found it very difficult to believe in Jesus because, how can I believe that somebody got on the cross, he died, and suddenly God loves me? How can that possibly be? And so I would pray, I would seek the truth, and I would say, look, God, if this is true about Jesus, I have to hitchhike to see my surgeon. And so I can't drive the car anymore because, my wrist was half cut off. And so I prayed, Lord, if this is about Jesus, I want you to provide some miraculous rides for me, as hitchhiking, because I live way at the end of a dead end road. And incredible, I won't bore you with all the details, but incredible things began to happen in my life. Things that that made it very difficult for me to deny Jesus because I didn't want to go there.
so I'm gonna ask people with their hands up, if you don't mind. I'm gonna try to kick off the event. Yeah, I apologize. I love the conversation, and we'll have a lot of conversation, but I do want to kind of kick things off. And
Hi, Garrett. I'll just say something quickly before you
Go
get
ahead, Ella.
started.
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much, everyone. I went through the chat. I pulled some names. I have some atheist, spiritual, agnostic, religious. Thank you so much. If anyone else wants to continue adding in our chat, I'll try to keep track. And in the chat, I also put what FTI is about and all of our links, how to get in touch with us. And I also put Garrett's 2 essays that he'll be talking about tonight, so everybody can follow along if they want.
Great.
And we'll get started. Thank
Thanks,
you so
Ella.
much for our social.
Thanks, Ellis. Appreciate it. So, it looks like people know how to raise hands, which is great. If you don't know how, there's reactions under the menu, and then there's a raise hand option. And just go ahead and raise your hand whenever you have questions. In the presentation portion of the evening, just raise your hand with questions asking for clarification on what I'm presenting. That was a request from people that attended to sort of keep things like on a focused presentation level. But then after the presentation is over, then it's like fair game to ask any questions you want and cover anything you want, alternative opinions, conflicting opinions, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, tonight's session is talking about atheism, agnosticism, spirituality, and religion. And really, I think there's a great quote, and I don't remember it exactly. Maybe someone else will remember it. Is that one of the hallmarks of like intelligence or maturity is to be able to understand another person, be able to disagree with them, but do so maturely and sort of respectfully. And so we want to keep that in mind because these are sometimes very heated positions to take. And I already sensed a little bit of it in our pre-discussion social where, I want to sort of treat everybody respectfully and politely in that, not to make fun of or vilify other people's perspectives, but to, you know, say, look, I may disagree with that, but sure, you're welcome to think that. And you know, we don't have to always agree, but it's good to understand where other people are coming from when they have a different perspective than us. And that's where we learn the most, is by listening to other people to understand them. So I just want to encourage everyone to listen with an open mind, which is part of the second intention of the Free Thinker Institute, is to be open-minded. And that's where we learn the most. And I also want everyone to feel free to share their perspective transparently, which is also the other part of the second intention. And to know that, you know, we're all gonna try to listen to each other with an open mind as each of us shares our perspectives. So with that said, tonight's event is brought by the Free Thinker Institute, which is a not-for-profit looking to support and empower people with personal and professional development for members, and for the community at large. And we organize free events every Tuesday evening. So we do this every Tuesday, almost every Tuesday. And we discuss ideas, you know, that are thoughtful, you know, thoughtful topics, and usually things that are not taught in academia or industry. So we're trying to fill that gap of education that academia or industry don't really cover. We also have a membership track for people interested in applying wisdom in their daily lives, to create a tight knit group of friends focused on being the best version of ourselves, seeking truth and being fair. And we're gonna talk about the benefits of doing those things next week, and sort of what, you know, what it means to be a member and that type of stuff. So so anyone interested in that, definitely come next week. We'll mention that at the end, hopefully, as well. Tonight I'm gonna basically present a perspective on religion, agnosticism, spirituality, and atheism, and basically a little bit of background on myself. I'm a CTO, CPO, and founder, president, entrepreneur. My hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy, which is where I created the Free Thinker Institute, which is the not-for-profit that I mentioned. And basically that's, you know, the Free Thinker Institute is my intellectual output in my rare spare time. I'm pretty much a workaholic, so that's what I spend most of my time on, but I love chatting about intellectually interesting things with people. So we have a large group tonight, so I want to ask people to keep to under 4 minutes when they talk, and try to limit, this is another piece of feedback that I thought was great, is to limit to one question at a time when you raise your hand. So just ask one question at a time, and then if you have another question, just drop your hand and then raise it again, and you can ask it right afterward. But that way everybody will get the chance to ask questions, and we give more sort of rotational basis to questions that people have. And I will pause when people have hands up in the presentation, so that I can answer any clarifying questions. I like questions along the way, because if I'm trying to present something and it's not clear and someone has a question, probably if you have a question, 4 other people have that question or more. And so definitely raise your hand and ask it, and then I'll try to clarify what I mean, so that the presentation is more clear and lucid. So with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and begin the presentation portion of the evening, if that's all right. And let me go to, I'm gonna share my screen, and I'm just sharing the essays that were shared in let me make sure I have the right screen. I think it's this one. There's 3 monitors, so that's where I'll be looking in different directions. Sometimes I take notes on the one on the right and I read off the one on the left. So first we're going to talk a little bit about religion. And so I have an interesting relationship with religion. I early in my life, I fell into the second category. Basically, most people fall into one of 2 categories, although I'll clarify a third, which is where I fall into now. You know, people are either generally religious followers of a single religion, or they're people that think that religion is used to control the masses, which is what I thought early in life. I'm going to make an argument that the third subset of society thinks that all religions have value and we can learn from all of them. That's my perspective now, after much thinking and searching. And I would also argue that number two, point number two is a point that has some merit in that religion is often used to control people, and often against the aims of the religion itself. An example was Buddhism has been used to justify war, even though it's a pacifist religion. And so that's an example of someone using a religion for their own purposes when really that's not in line with the spiritual teachings of the religion or the religious teachings of that religion. And so, sure, like religions get misused on a regular basis, and that does happen. I'm not trying to say that it doesn't. All I'm saying is that religion also comes with it, and the Inquisition, by the way, is another example of religion used to cause great amounts of harm. And I would argue, I recently came up with a little, like, I like these little formula type of things, which is evil equals good plus misunderstanding. See, and the reason I say that is because the people in the Inquisition thought they were doing good by saving people's souls by torturing them until they became Christian. And so that was the misunderstanding. They thought they were doing good, but they had a misunderstanding, and really they were doing evil. And I would argue that almost all evil in the world is really misunderstanding plus someone thinking they're doing a good job. And that's why the first three intentions of the Freethinker Institute are about really clearly seeing the truth, which is, to seek truth, be the best version of ourselves, and be fair. And then number two is transparently share what you believe, and listen with an open mind towards new ideas that will help you achieve those things. And then number three is improve your critical thinking skills so you can discern fact from fiction more readily. And I think those three things will help us see the truth more clearly, which is one of the goals. And that said, I don't think, even though religion has been misused, by the way, the people with their hands, do you have questions about what I'm presenting now, Michael and Brett? Michael, if you
no, not right now.
Okay, so if you don't mind, just put your hands down for now, unless you have questions about something that I'm presenting, and just save the questions save the questions for things that I'm presenting on, and then after I've presented, then we'll put hands up for other stuff.
Okay.
Daniel, did you have a question about what I'm presenting?
Yeah, about what you're presenting now? Yeah.
Sorry, Daniel had his hand up before, so Daniel Klein.
Yeah, I mean, I just, a quick comment is,
Yeah,
the fact that religion controls or doesn't control, I think, is irrelevant to the truth value of it.
I agree, and that's
So,
exactly my point.
You have
Yeah.
politics, the way they put, I still like politics, so it's not an argument against religion, even though I'm not religious, so.
No, I agree with you completely, and that's exactly the point that I'm about to make, is that even though religion is used to control the masses, and many times it also has a great deal of wisdom to teach. And and all religions that I've encountered so far have a great deal of wisdom to teach. And so I guess I think, even though I used to think religion was bad and only used to control the masses and didn't add any value, I actually now think that all religions add value. And the more that I've actually listened to religious teachings with an open mind, I've learned how much value they offer. And I find that it's consistent across all religions, although I find I learn more wisdom from some religions, than others. I agree with you totally, Daniel. So Daniel Klein. And that said, Daniel Mann, you had your hand up. Did you have a question about something I'm presenting?
Yeah, I have two, but I'm gonna limit it to one.
Thanks.
I would challenge you, Garrett, about that evil is just a matter of misunderstanding. If it was, then I think we can come to a number of bad conclusions. For instance, if it's a misunderstanding, then education is the answer. But it seems like the most educated people can be the most evil. The other thing is, people have this belief today, which is, I think, a dangerous, naive belief, that love conquers all. If you just show people that you love them, you'll overcome this misunderstanding and you will bring out the best of people in people. Sometimes that's true. So I'd like you to defend that idea, if you can, that evil is just a matter of misunderstanding.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I want to answer clarifying questions about what I mean rather than open up to challenging like during the session, because that was part of what people felt like we got off on tangents by challenging the ideas rather than just trying to understand them. I definitely do want to answer that because I think it's really important. And I took a note of it and I want to come back to it. And I'm not going to say that I can 100% logically defend that, but I can take specific examples where what I would challenge you, Daniel, is to come up with an example of something that you think is pure evil and not based on misunderstanding, and go ahead and think of an example like that and take some time to do it. And then after I've presented, give me that example and I'll try to explain to you why I think it's actually a misunderstanding rather than simply someone who is consciously intending to do evil. So that said, David Sternman, do you have a clarifying question?
Well, in your introduction to religion, I'm trying to understand whether this is where you're sort of working out the definition or just a sort of social view of it before you get into that, because your other paper kind of goes into what is atheistic and non-atheistic. So we're going to maybe talk about what religion is again. Is that the case?
We'll define religion. I realize I didn't do it like all definitions up front. But when I read the 2 essays, I thought it made more sense to present this one first, but I will go into defining religion in the second essay.
Okay, so at this point, the only thing I would say is in order to keep it equalized for the religious people here and the atheists or whatever non-religious people here, that equally as much as discussion that paper right there in front of us could be rewritten using the word science instead of religion, and saying how science has caused a great deal of harm. And we could talk about the Tuskegee experiments and diethylamide and lobotomies from medieval bleeding, but listening to it, we have to listen to both things at once, right? That's all.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think, science has been used to rationalize a lot of harm. But I would argue a lot, it's used to justify harm in some cases, but I would argue science has also been used to create a lot of good. But tonight's discussion is not as much about science, but I appreciate you bringing it into it because maybe we want to bring that in some way, because some people treat science like a religion, and so it's, I think.
But what I'm saying is we can accept the good of science automatically, even though the same claims which are made against religion are made against. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. But again, let's come back to that if we could a little bit later. So Abraham, do you have a question? Clarifying question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a little loud environment. I have a couple of comments. First one is regarding the category, religious followers, and second one, people who believe religion is used to control the masses. If I can add one more is the shaman and the channel. What I mean by that is that there are small groups of people who are not followers, who are not people who think religion in a certain way. They are basically a tool to channel certain things. So I wonder how many of you have experienced or encountered those people, but those people exist. Some of them are quite powerful, as you like it or not. Another comment is that we are not religion. We are observer. We are creative. We are, how can I say, interpreter. So how can the interpreter or creative or observer can talk about the essence? I mean, talking is fine, but it's almost like the sequence is wrong. The sequence like a createe cannot talk about creator too much. Creator talk about createe. So there is some confusion as if we can be both. That's, I think, a little.
Did you have a clarifying question, Abraham? Because I didn't hear, I guess like, I want to try to focus just like, because like most of the feedback that I've gotten historically is that people want to hear what the presentation is, and then we go to open conversation. So I didn't know if you had a clarifying question.
Yeah, my question was, I added actually two. First one is the existence of shamans or channels. So that would add some, how can I say, perspective on religion.
So shamanism.
I'm not talking about shamanism. There are channels and seers that they are not interpreting religion. They are not seeing religion in a certain way. They are like a mule. They are tool.
So I'm
to
just
recite the voice.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Alice. So everyone, please just very, very brief, interruptions during the presentation, and then we'll pick up on everyone's points later on.
Yeah, let's come back to
We'll
this,
probably
Abraham,
need
after
another
the
15 minutes,
presentation,
okay?
And Daniel, you still have your hand up. I think that you forgot to put it down if you could.
No, I'll wait till after you finish. I have a couple of questions.
Okay. So the second point is, religion, does add value, if you listen. And basically what I would argue is that all religions have wisdom to teach, but it requires, reading listening to what those religions have to teach with an open mind, and using your critical thinking skills and having a healthy skepticism to what they teach, but also having an open mind to the wisdom that they teach, and not necessarily following them from blind faith, but using critical thinking skills to discern what's wisdom versus what's not. And I think if each one of us uses our critical thinking skills, especially if we improve our critical thinking skills, which is part of the goal of the Freethinker Institute, is to help people improve their critical thinking skills, we can better discern what is really valuable wisdom from what's not, from all religions that we want to learn from. And I guess I would say that that really helps add value to our lives, where we can learn new wisdom from multiple sources or many sources, because there are many religions out there. And I've since I started doing this, found it so much fun to learn wisdom from so many different sources. And I find certain things I disagree with about a religion, and all right, that's fine. Then I just ignore that, right? And I'm entitled to do that as a person. And you don't have to agree with everything that a religion teaches, but if a religion teaches something of value, cool, listen to it and learn from it. And so that's, for me, how I approach religion now, as a person who's put a lot more thought and into it. And I would argue that even if you follow one religion, you can still learn from other religions, even if you are a follower of a single religion, because there's nothing necessarily that prevents you from learning from other sources of wisdom. And so the other thing I would say is, like, even if you do follow one religion, I would argue that your choice to follow that religion was done based on your own reason. So ultimately, using your own reason to discern what is wisdom and what's not is what you should do on a point-by-point basis, rather than trusting that religion, everything that the religion's teachers are saying is true blindly, because that's what actually allowed the Inquisition to happen. The Inquisition never would have happened if all the religious followers, who clearly knew that, I'm going to make this bold statement, that the religious followers knew that torturing people were not necessarily the right thing to do. They were following the religious leaders who said, this is what we must do. And, I don't think that every person really agreed that was the right thing to do. And that said, I would argue that even for people that follow one religion strictly, again, they've used their own judgment to get to that point, or you've used your own judgment to get to that point. You might as well use your own judgment to discern what's wisdom and what's not from all religions as well. And so, ultimately, it all comes back to using our own judgment. And that's where the importance of critical thinking skills is vital, because even if we follow a religion blindly, we still had to use our own judgment to get there. And so why not hone our critical thinking skills? Because, there might be people commandeering that religion and trying to use the religion to further their own aims rather than to teach wisdom in the community of religious people. And the only way we discern that from the actual religious teachings is by using our own critical thinking skills. So actually we make the religion we follow healthier if we do follow a religion. I actually personally don't, but if we do follow a religion, we make the religion healthier by using our own critical thinking skills about what to follow in that religion as well. So that said, Shane Marie.
Yes, hi. So I'm just thinking in terms of whether you're religious or non-religious, or so how do we open our minds sufficiently to be open to the wisdom that's available? So say religion is false, but there is wisdom in religion. So say you have a scientific background or mind, and so you don't believe in God, but there's still wisdom there. How do we open ourselves sufficiently to the wisdom wherever it can be found? How do we just prime ourselves for that? Because it seems like if we believe in science and we don't believe in religion, if we believe in religion, then we have issues with science, perhaps. But I'm just wondering, how do we keep ourselves open to wisdom wherever we can find it, even if we don't believe in the ultimate conclusions of either?
So great question, Shane Marie. And we actually had a session on how science is compatible with religion. And I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version to answer your question. And essentially what it says is what I presented, and I presented a logical argument defending this using something called Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which is 400 level computer science theorem. But what it ultimately comes down to is that science is a consistent what's called knowledge base. It's a consistent form of creating knowledge with a high degree of certainty. But what it turns out, based on Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and there were some other similar parallel theories that were created at the same time, but essentially what it comes down to is that they're limited in what they can prove true. And so you actually need inconsistent knowledge in order to come to all truths, but you can't logically prove them with any consistent logic whatsoever, because those things aren't provable by consistent logic.
God is limited. The limited can't get to the truth. The truth is the whole, is the infinite.
Jacob, I appreciate you, my friend, but please raise your hand. Please raise your hand if you want to speak. So that's where I think acknowledging science has a great place in creating consistent knowledge, and recognizing that and using it when it has really high degrees of certainty of truth is great. But then also recognizing that religion or spirituality, or what I used to call theoretical philosophy, but that has another term, I have to come up with a new name for it, but philosophy that is inconsistent also has a place, and they're actually complementary when you look at them that way. And that said, that's like kind of a, it's a related topic, so I'm kind of delving into it, but the long story short is, to your question about how do we prime ourselves, it's just keeping an open mind towards what resonates with us. And when we listen to spiritual teachings from any spirituality or religion or scientific source, like just keep an open mind to anything you learn and focus first on understanding why the person teaching you believes that. And if they have a really good reason and it seems like it will benefit you to believe it, just accept it and try to make that a part of your life until you find a better solution going forward. Does that make sense, Jane Marie?
Yes, it does make sense. And it's probably not now, but maybe I'm deeply curious about this notion of resonance. I'm sure it's not for now. If you have any sense of what that is and what makes it possible, because different things resonate differently in each of us. So I'm just deeply curious about what resonance is. I'm sure that's not now, but I share that just in the chance that you might discuss it later. So thank you.
Yeah. So when I say resonate, so I'm a computer scientist, so I come from a perspective of a very logical point of view. And so for me, like, I've honed in on how do we come to beliefs. And I think that following, like, while I just acknowledge that certain times, like, consistent logic won't find you the right answer, and we need to be willing to acknowledge that. Having axioms and logical rules of inference is how I form beliefs, and I think is a solid way to form them. However, some of those axioms may not be logically supportable themselves. They're simply things that, and an axiom just is something that we think is so likely to be true that we believe it to be true. And so, ultimately understanding what are the axioms and what are what is the logic that we can conclude from those axioms is what I mean by resonates. Now, there's also intuition, which is where we just feel in our heart that it's true. And I think there's a place for that as well. And that's where I would say where science doesn't have a good answer, you're fine to use intuition, which is just a belief that something is true because it resonates with you. The non-scientific way of saying it is your heart just says that that's right.
No.
Courtney, you had a question?
Yeah, so when you say you can get something good out of every religion, you just have to use critical thinking skills and be open-minded and learn what the good things are. It gives me pause because a lot of what religious teachings are brainwashing, and because you're being taught to believe things which can be demonstrably proven false. So if this is what you're being taught to believe, even if it brings you to the proper conclusion, I would hesitate to call it valuable.
So if you think that something that's being taught by a religion is demonstrably false, don't believe it. But if you hear Christianity teaches that love and compassion are a good thing, and you find that when you embrace love and compassion in your life and you treat other people compassionately, they're actually nicer to you, which I think if you do that, you will find that they are. Maybe that's a good thing to learn from Christianity, right? Love and compassion are good general mantras to follow. Now, that doesn't mean you should follow them all blindly 100% of the time. Even Daniel, who's Christian, said, sometimes these things can steer you wrong. And I forget exactly what you said, Daniel, but it was something along those lines. But yeah, like all I'm saying, Courtney, is use your own judgment about what's wisdom and what's folly, even if it's taught from a religion. Don't immediately discount it just because a religion teaches it. If they teach something that resonates with you, cool, like accept that. Does that make sense, Courtney?
So I will, that's your answer, and that's what I asked for. I don't agree with necessarily believing in things which can be demonstrably proven false, even if they do bring about positive conclusions. I'll just say
I didn't ask you to, Courtney. What I said is, let me ask this, Courtney. Do you think that absolutely everything that every religion in the world teaches is absolutely unuseful and not useful in any way, shape, or form?
I don't think that's a fair question.
It is a fair question. It's a fair question because you're making a statement that essentially says that, and I'm trying to ask if you really mean that.
But no, I'm not. I'm saying if someone tells you something and they tell you to believe it, and then you find evidence which they can prove what they've told you to be untrue, and you still hold the belief, that's really what religious faith is. Now you're saying, like, if you believe in like Jesus's love and compassion or something like that, that's fine when it comes to something like that. But there can be some really dark stuff included in that particular education model that I'm not necessarily comfortable just saying that you can learn something good from every religion. And I'm not necessarily comfortable saying that having religion as some kind of yardstick for morality is a good idea or has been a good idea.
I didn't say anything about religion being a yardstick for morality, and I didn't say anything about you having to believe anything that you don't believe to be true of your own free will and volition, right? All I said is listen to religious teachings with an open mind, and if you find they resonate with you and that they may be helpful to you, then learn from them, Courtney. That's all I said.
Okay.
If you find that they're not helpful to you, Courtney, and you literally think every teaching of every religion in the world is not useful, cool, Courtney, then don't listen to any religious teaching. But I don't think you would find that if you listen to religious teachings with an open mind. I think you'll learn there's a lot of wisdom there to be learned. And I'm not telling you to trust anything blindly or to have blind faith in anything. I don't have blind faith myself. And, I don't recommend that anyone does. I think that like you can, if you feel that blind faith is right for you, cool, like that's a personal choice, but I'm not going to recommend anyone do it. but I will recommend everybody listen with an open mind towards ideas that may help them be the best version of themselves, seek truth, and be fair. And I would say don't discount a source simply because it's a religious source. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Hi,
I
everybody.
rest my case.
Courtney, all of this is really great, but let's let Garrett finish, maybe another 10, 15 minutes, and then we're going to open out to more discussion.
Just let him finish the meeting. Goodness me, he said it so many times.
So
It's okay,
look,
Will,
I'm
don't worry.
happy to
we're
answer
gonna-
questions that are clarifying, and I'm happy to entertain like people that want to disagree with me, but I'd like to do the disagreement part at the end. Because otherwise, like what people have complained about in the past is that they couldn't understand the argument because there was so much disagreement during the presentation portion. And so we've gotten a lot of feedback from people on that. So I just want to limit questions only to clarifying questions to understand what I'm presenting. And then after I've presented it, then definitely feel free to come up with contradictory stuff. So for the hands that are up, do people have clarifying questions? Daniel Klein, go ahead.
I mean, it's partly a question, it's partly, but I think you're conflating how to live life with belief. So I agree with you. I draw, I love,
But can we please just
the
listen,
truth-
let
the
can we
truth
just
shall
please
set
just
you
let Garrett
free.
finish the presentation before we
Let
go
me,
off on
let me
these
finish.
sidetracks?
Let me finish. The truth shall set you free from the New Testament is great. The Quran has some great advice on hospitality. I mean, clearly, any model that you can get and learn from, you should take. But it doesn't have to be religion. It can be, psychologists. It could be teachers. It could be educators. It could be your grandparents. So
Right.
why do we have to emphasize religion? Because you're conflating beliefs with how to live life. I can listen to Creflo Dollar and Benny Hinn and get great advice on how to live life. And they're a bunch of lowlifes. But once in a while, Creflo Dollar is a brilliant man. So what, to say that I can get wisdom out of the Bible, that's no great revelation. How do I live life? My models could be Garrett, could be William Land, everybody in this room. I don't
So
need
Daniel,
religion
I
for that.
agree with you. I think we should learn from all sources, and I'm not saying you should only learn from religious sources, and I don't think I said anything like that. So I'm not saying that you should only learn from religion. I'm saying you should learn from all sources, religions included. That's all.
So why emphasize religion? That's my question.
Because tonight's discussion is about atheism, agnosticism, religion, and spirituality. And so those are the sources of wisdom that we're talking about tonight. But yeah, like I agree with you, like we should learn from all sources of religion, and science was brought up. We should learn from science too. The reason I'm bringing up religion, Daniel, is because a lot of people discount religion, and I did earlier on in my life. As I said, all religion is trash, and I'm not going to learn from any of it because it's all worthless. And all I'm trying to do is say, guys, that's a misunderstanding. Like there's a lot of wisdom in religion, but there's a lot of wisdom in a lot of places, Daniel. And I agree with you. Like we should learn from all of them. Why are you shaking your head?
Because
I'm agreeing with you, Daniel.
No, they're not. You're not partly agreeing with me because I think you're conflating beliefs and how to live life. Okay, how to live life I can draw from religion. I can draw from everybody, but religion entails beliefs that are metaphysical, beliefs that are philosophical. And why bring that into the fold? And you were discussing with another gentleman here. Do I have to accept the whole thing or not? I don't have to accept any belief about how to live life. That's my point.
I'm not going to be able to answer questions if every question is a complete challenge on what's being presented, because I get too much negative feedback about people derailing the conversation with questions. So look, I want to answer questions to help clarify what people are trying to understand, but I welcome everybody challenging, but please do it at the end, because the silent majority complains about this stuff. I don't know what to tell you, but like that's what I'm hearing from people after the events.
But I mean, it is the norm at any presentation to wait until the presentation is over before you start asking questions. So
it is, and maybe we should do that, Will, and maybe I shouldn't take questions. I like to take questions to answer if I'm not presenting something clearly, to be able to answer and clarify. So I like to do that, but like please, people, when you're asking a question, make it a clarifying question on what I'm presenting, not a challenge to what I'm presenting. You are more than welcome to challenge. I welcome every challenge. I will address them at the end, but only at the end, please.
Yeah, I think, Garrett, you'll find, unless you say no questions till the end, you're always going to be people mixing up clarification questions with challenges, and then you're just going to get bogged
Then
down.
let's not take questions. Let's not take questions until the end. So
Yes.
we'll do that for the remainder of tonight, because so far all of the questions have been people wanting to challenge, which again, I like. I want people to challenge me. I want to answer those challenges, but I want to do it at the end, because too many people complain that they don't understand what's being presented when that happens during the presentation. So for now, I'm going to hold questions until after I presented the next essay, and then we'll let everyone challenge to their heart's content. So for the overview, basically, you know, my perspective, I'm spiritual, not religious. And basically I want to sort of clarify, you know, atheism basically says, I definitively think that there is no God or godlike being. However, I think a lot of religious people tend to say atheists are immoral, and I want to clarify that that's not clear. Like, atheists can be very moral, and I know some extremely moral atheists, many extremely moral atheists. And agnostics say that they don't definitively think that whether or not there's a God or not has been proven or disproven. And so they're kind of suspending judgment to whether or not there is a God. And to the point of whether or not atheists and agnostics can be moral, Jeremy Bentham, which is the person credited with utilitarianism, although some of the ideas went back further than him, basically is a non-theistic code of morality, which is essentially, and I'm taking a little bit of liberty here, which is essentially, you know, minimizing harm, and then, you know, some reads of it also include maximizing happiness. The way that I have interpreted it is maximizing happiness and minimizing harm simultaneously, knowing that there's some trade-off between happiness and harm is basically a positive thing to go after. And it is based in reason, not based in God. And so that was Jeremy Bentham's argument for morality and what we should be considering as moral actions. And by the way, moral is a term that is heavily loaded and a lot of people are allergic to, but I want to clarify, all morality means is that there are right things to do and wrong things to do. And if you agree that murdering innocent people is wrong, then you agree that there's some level of morality. If you agree that child rape is wrong, you agree that there's some level of morality. We all have some sense that certain things are just absolutely immoral and indefensible. And so I would argue morality should not be this highly contentious subject, but it is highly contentious. And as a result, I'm going to be working on an essay trying to show that you can logically derive utilitarianism or maximizing happiness and minimizing harm from pure reason. That'll be another subject for another day. That said, I want to talk about what spiritual means. So the definition of spiritual from the dictionary, or the definitions from the dictionary that sort of relate most to the way that I would interpret it, are relating to the spirit or the seat of moral or religious nature, relating to the mind or intellect, and relating to the spirit or soul, distinguished from the physical nature. In other words, like a spiritual approach to life. I guess I see being spiritual as the recognition of a couple of things. One is the existence of a spirit or a soul or a me or essence of myself. And I would argue that the essence of oneself are what makes free will decisions. If you want to see, and I term this argument in defense of free will. So I have another, and we discussed free will another evening. If you want to review that argument in defense of free will, feel free to do that, and feel free to contest that in the online community. Would be happy to chat with anyone that's read it about any refutations they have of that argument in defense of free will. But I think I have a pretty solid argument that free will does exist and that we do have an essence of ourselves. And if that essence of ourselves is, if that essay is correct, then that essence of ourselves also has the ability to reason. I don't think many of us would argue that human beings don't have an ability to reason. We all have the ability to reason. Sometimes we blind ourselves to it for for various reasons and create misunderstandings. But we can all draw logical conclusions to some level of capability, some of us better than others. And that's part of why the third intention is honing critical thinking skills to improve our critical thinking skills so we can make better conclusions in a more logical way. And then I would also argue that we should use that ability to reason to make the world better and determine, to make sense of the world and determine how we should act within it. And so that for me is what spiritual means, is sort of the recognition that we have a sense of self, we have the ability to reason, we can draw logical inferences, and that we should use that ability to reason to determine how we should act in the world. And I will try to make an argument another night that there are certain things that are moral behaviors, or those that we should act towards, which is increasing happiness and decreasing harm, and that those are logically derivable from sort of the inherent nature of being sentient beings. The next thing is I'm going to talk about religious, and the definition of religion is basically here, and essentially it's for a religious group of people, for a people, I don't want to use the term in a definition, but for a group of people with common beliefs. It's about creation of superhuman agency or agencies, rituals, devotion to devotional and ritual observances, moral codes that are agreed upon by people who are members of the religion. There's Sharia law for people who are Muslim, and there's the 10 Commandments. And so all of these things are, sort of uniting factors of people who have religious beliefs. Some reflections. The definition number 1 includes the cause, nature, and purpose of the universe. I actually, we had another discussion another evening about the nature of the existence of the universe. I actually think the universe is infinite and has always existed. There's another essay linked to that, but we won't cover that tonight because it's a whole nother subject for another night. But that said, the other definition is devotional and ritual observances. I tend not to find a lot of value in devotional or ritual observances. And, I've been to Catholic Mass and I have good friends that are Catholic, but, it's a lot of ritual. And for them, it adds a lot of consistency in their life and they feel like it adds value to their life. For me, like I want to be having a meaningful conversation with someone during that time, not be, following ritual observances. And so that's where I say different people find different things that add value to their lives. For some people, that religious consistency of rituals is helpful. For me, that's not helpful. And so I choose not to follow a religion that emphasizes that. The other thing is, you notice from definitions 2 and 3 that the practices are generally agreed by a specific number of people. You'll notice that also fits with the definition of subjective morals linked from a Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And so actually, while religions tend to say that their religion has the objective morals, the very definition of subjective morals is more or less, the morals that a religion believes. So in some respects, actually, if we look at it objectively, religious morals are subjective morals, not objective morals. Now, that said, I do think that that there are objective morals, and that's another discussion for another day. But I find it interesting that most of the people claiming that their objectives are, their morals are objective, are actually sort of opting into a definition of morality that is more or less subjective morals because it's by a specific subset of people rather than a logically derivable set of morals. They're having faith in their religion as being the only right religion. And again, like, there are so many religions that have conflicting ideas. How do we decide that any one is absolutely the right one? We can only do that using our own judgment. And if we're going to do that, like, why not use our own judgment on each of the teachings of each of the religions? So this is the essay on morals, which anyone that wants to read is welcome to read. it's going to be reworked to be a little bit more comprehensive and more Spinoza-esque in terms of the way that it's written, starting from axioms and using rules of inference. And then I have an essay called The Life Philosophy, which any of these that people want to discuss in the online community, I'm happy to, but I'm not going to delve into them tonight so that we have more time for discussion, which everybody is very eager to get into, and I am as well. But I would want to make the argument that finding harmony is, and when I say harmony, I don't mean just agreeing with everybody who disagrees with us. I don't mean just, laying down and accepting every other belief that someone says. What I mean by harmony is every group, whether atheist, agnostic, religious, or spiritual, has something to learn from people in all the other groups. And I would make that argument, and I welcome people trying to come up with a counter argument where they literally could learn absolutely nothing from any one of those other groups. I would love to hear that in the challenging section, which we're going to get into shortly. But I would argue that we actually have plenty to learn from every one of those other groups, including our own group. And what we should do is, let's adhere to our own morals. Let's not impose them on the other groups. Let's just adhere to our own morals within our group. And let's, share the wisdom that we have in our group with the people from other groups, and share them with an open mind, but non-attachment. And what I mean by non-attachment is, if that doesn't resonate with someone else, let them disagree with us, right? And it's okay to disagree. And it's, what matters more than having agreement is that we listen to each other with an open mind and we understand each other's perspective. If we listen to other people with an open mind and we understand their perspective, and then we disagree with them still, all right, then we agree to disagree, right? And then maybe they listen to us with an open mind, and maybe they'll agree with us, maybe they won't. What matters is that we listen to each other with an open mind to better understand other people's perspective, even if they come from one of these other paradigms. And I think that there are these hard lines where people go, I'm not going to learn from anyone religious. We heard it earlier from someone that, more or less said, I can't learn anything from any religion. And I tried to pin him down on that. He didn't want to agree with it, but because it sounds unfathomable, right? Like, I can't learn anything from any religion in the world. Like, but that was more or less what I was hearing from what he said. So, I just want to encourage everyone to listen to the wisdom that you can get from everybody in all sources. Yes, science. Yes, YouTube videos. Yes, you have to discern where you want to spend your time, and yes, do that. And, you don't have to listen to everybody, but, I do encourage listening with an open mind to people that you think might add value to your life, and listen to them with an open mind and decide for yourself what to believe and what not to believe. And so I would just say, the only thing that for me seems like a reasonably appealing thing, and I haven't heard a good reason not to agree with this, is increasing happiness and decreasing harm. If you can do those, net, if you can increase happiness and decrease harm, with knowing that there's an exchange for happiness and harm, but if you can do that, it seems like a universally appealing thing. But I don't know any other universally appealing things, and I welcome anyone saying why that's not universally appealing when we get into the debate discussion section. That said, I want to encourage everyone to, and basically, when it comes down to laws, we do need to have agreement. And I guess for me, that's where, laws should be about increasing happiness and minimizing harm, which is, sort of something that I think will appeal to anyone that can reason for themselves. And again, I welcome anyone challenging that. If you can find a reason that increasing happiness and decreasing harm net is a bad thing, I welcome anyone to try to come up with a scenario that actually they can defend under those that premise. So with that said, we have a lot of hands up. I want to start to get to them. That is the end of the presentation, and now I fully welcome all questions, debates, discussions, challenges. Bring it all on. So that said, Brett, why don't you go first?
Okay. What I noticed, you had the three categories. I don't think I fall into any of those categories.
Which one are you in?
Well, if I had to summarize my views, I'd say I'm not religious. I don't follow any religion. You know, I guess I'm agnostic. I wouldn't say there's not a God. I don't think we can prove or disprove that. But the main thing that's always been interesting to me is that people who are not religious tend to view, they don't generally, they tend to think that all religions are equally implausible, you know, or equally unbelievable. But I don't think that. I mean, like, I'm not a Christian, but you know, it's a more believable story than something like Hinduism, which is just oral tradition. Like, you know, it wouldn't shock me if somebody said that, you know, the stuff that happened in the Bible really was true. I'd be surprised, but I don't know. People think that Jesus really did exist. You know, so it is maybe he, you know, and the various people claim they saw him perform miracles. Are they probably lying, mistaken, distorted by history? Sure. You know, it would be unlikely, but it's certainly possible. I mean, there is a lot of historical evidence for it. It's just such a ridiculous claim, you know, that someone was the son of God and a virgin, that, you know, I'm going to guess that probably history changed the record and that that's not really true, but it's possible. I wouldn't be stunned if somebody told me, yeah, you know, the stuff that happened in the Bible was, it is true. Whereas something like Hinduism, there's no historical context at all. It's just clearly oral tradition. It's not based on actual people. It's based on invented deities. So I always think that's interesting that people don't tend to look at or struggle with. I've never met anyone who you know, who struggles with you know, which religion, with, you know, if one religion is true, which religion is, you know, most people don't struggle with that. They, you know, I mean, probably none of the religions are right, but you know, if some are more probable than others, I think, but I don't know. Nobody seems to have that view. If you told me that Hinduism was true, I would think I was dreaming, or that, you know, somehow misinformed. It's just not possible, really.
Hindus would tell you you're dreaming, by the way. It's called shoot, I'm blanking on the name. Mara, I think. But like, yeah, Hindus would tell you you are dreaming, actually. But wouldn't, it sounds like what you're saying is that there are potentially things you could learn from any religion, but you don't agree with any specific one full-fledged. Is that fair?
Yeah. I'm more talking about the theological aspects rather than the moral aspects.
We don't debate the theological aspects of each religion. Like, we won't have time for that tonight, but I think that you and I fall into the same category, which is we both see that there can be value from any religion, and what we need to do is listen to that religion with an open mind and see where it adds value to our lives. And if we see it adding, you know, having wisdom that adds value to our lives, cool, let's adopt it. And where we think that it's got, you know, ideas that are very implausible, all right, we're going to ignore those and not worry about it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like Buddhism, you know, I think is one of the most implausible of all religions, because the Buddha said he was not a god. So I'd be stunned if, you know, he actually was a god and a place called Nirvana really existed. But, you know, Buddhism is proved to be right morally, or even in terms of like personal identity, the views of the self. It's proven to be right about a lot of things. So there's a lot of wisdom in that religion, even though theologically I'm 99.999% sure that it's, you know, not correct, and that, you know, souls don't exist, reincarnation doesn't exist, nirvana doesn't exist.
Well, you said some interesting things that I didn't understand. The Buddha himself said that he wasn't a god, and therefore there's no one that says the Buddha was a god. Like, even Buddha's followers didn't say he was a god. And it's very plausible to me.
But they treat him like a god.
The only part that
they act as if he's a god.
So Jacob, if you want to speak, definitely raise your hand, and we would love to hear from you. But let's let everyone speak to the people.
Hi, it's Alice. Hi, thank you so much for opening up our discussion. There's a lot of hands up. It's popular tonight, so let's go at about 2.5 minutes to 3 maximum. And Garrett likes to interact with everybody, so you'll notice he'll make a little comment after, but we're gonna try to move through because there's lots of hands up.
Yep.
And good, we have looks like we have a Hindu next, Rama, so he can respond.
Go ahead, Rama.
Hi everyone. Actually, I'm a she. I'm I'm a female, but it's very interesting topic today, and this is my first time joining you guys. So my take on all this conversation is, first of all, God is a concept, in my opinion. I follow Hinduism because I was, first of all, like, when it comes to religion, we are not born with the religion. We come into this world and then religion is taught to us. God never said that he's God or she's God and people should worship him or her. It's actually people, whether it was Jesus, whether it was like Muhammad, whether it was like, any of the, whether it was Buddha, they never claimed that they were not God. I think people actually took their teachings and, they made them God. And it's very interesting that, all the reasons that we fight for when we talk about religions and we say, oh, my religion is better than yours, or, this is better than that. If any of those gods were here, none of them would say, okay, go kill that person because, he's not worshiping me. None of them would say that. And when it comes to, that is my, so religion, in my opinion, is the concept, and we don't have to follow one religion. We are superior beings with very good brains. And I think, the beauty of us being humans is that we have a choice. And you can just take good points from everywhere and, just make your own religion and call it. Why we have to even identify ourselves with something? We don't have to. Just take the good points of everything and just follow the basic. I think the reason why religion is there is so that people can follow the good practices, so that they don't kill each other, so that we don't live like animals and we are like, just killing each other for survival. Just imagine if there was no religion, people would just like, this whole world would probably end overnight. So that's my take on religion. When it comes to morals is also not, there is, in my opinion, there is nothing right or wrong. We have given definitions of right and wrong. And morals also keep changing with time. There was a time, like, for instance, like, in some religions, let's say, they say, oh, the women should not reveal their bodies in some, in some way. So from them, that is immoral, right? But in others, like, let's say in America, in like some other countries, right? So we give equal rights to women. So who is being moral here, right? Who is following it? What is right and what's wrong? It's whatever teachings make you follow a good path and be make you peaceful. I think that's what it is. And my last thing on science versus religion is that science actually can tell you a lot about what is physical. Means you can cut a human body, you can say, okay, yeah, this is liver, this is heart, this is kidney, and it can go into further, like how our neuroscience works and this and that. But science can never prove what goes out of the body, what goes away when a person dies, what disappears, how everything is going systematically in our body at regular intervals, how our heart beats, and how things are happening on their own without any outer interference. So I think that's where those things where we cannot explain anything, then we think, okay, there is a superpower out there and we call it God. And God is nothing but your belief. You can, like in Hinduism, like we can,
Rama. Oh,
Yes.
okay. Thank you so much for that comment. We'll go on to the next. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rama. I think we agree that we can learn from all sources. I don't think the world would go away overnight without religion, but I don't think that religion is going to disappear. So I'm not worried about it. So I don't want to debate that one with you. I want to let Reddy.
And just to make one correction, Garrett, I said that if there was no religion, we know already, like, what good practices are. So it's not going to it's not going to disappear overnight. Thank you.
Cool, no problem. Sorry, I didn't mean to straw man you.
No problem at all.
Sorry about that.
Thank
so,
you.
Reddy, why don't you share your thoughts?
Hey, Garrett, I think like to your point, I guess like you and I think Brett was the other one. So I guess like I closely like associate with you guys like on actually like really really understanding like what different religious like scriptures teach. But I'm still I still fall under atheist just because like learning something from a religious script like would not mean like that I would actually believe in God. In the sense of like where the religion has always been, again, like different religions came at different points of time, and also like it also like varied across space, like different like continents or like countries had like space, like I think like regions had like different religions. I guess like we are taking like one we are living in a slice like where we look back and then like we see like which is right. Probably like that is something that is like fundamentally wrong in understanding like what is truth. Like all those beliefs, like all those like like practices that they had like existed at different points of time, which could have been like really good and worked for that point of time, but it need not necessarily work right now. But majority of the things that different religions teach like fall under like they all say like what, like you can't harm other people, like that has been like a fundamental understanding of humans like across like centuries. So that's the reason like why probably like every religion teaches that. But there are certain things like that probably like different religions disagree, maybe because like it was not born at the same time at the same region, because like it actually has like existence over like centuries and centuries and centuries. So maybe like the whole concept of like trying to understand like what works like based on like the like basically taking everything probably is something that we are doing wrong. Like maybe like we take like good things like or like things that work for you from every possible source, like as you mentioned, it could be from science, it could be from religion. But again, like does that still make you like an atheist or like like not like a person who believes in God? Like that's completely debatable, because at every point of time, again, like I believe when something is not proven, when something is not like in a human's hand, like they attribute they wanted to look into something that is beyond their understanding, and that's the reason like why they actually like put the name of God. Some of them put name of God, some of them put name of nature. I guess like it is reducing like the number of things that we understand is probably like increasing with science, but that doesn't mean that like many things that we don't understand like can be associated or cannot be associated with God. Having said that, like I have like one small thing like that actually happened like a month ago, like where I was actually flying from San Jose like to Boston, and I actually had like a huge turbulence, like like at that point of time everyone was like so silent. But at that point of time, I identified myself agnostic for like many years and atheist for almost like six to 8 years now. But for a split second, like a thought of God came to me, and after that, like I started like questioning like everything that I'm doing, and I still think that I'm like atheist, but I don't know like why that one, like when you're pushed to an extreme, like would you actually look for, I mean the intention was like the plane should not crash, but like thinking about God for a second, maybe I did that maybe because like I was actually brought up like in in a society like where people believe or look for God like when things don't happen their way. But maybe like my fundamental belief is still like what, I mean, this is something that I still have to explore, but people can correct me on that. But also like the other thing that like one last thing that I want to say is I think like to maximizing happiness and minimizing harm, like I guess like adding to that, like there is one thing that I actually like understood like over years. So that understanding like pain is pain for everyone is basically one of the things that I tell myself, because like when I actually look at other person, like I don't want the person to be like treated badly, treated like unfairly, or like I don't want the person to actually experience pain like as much as I don't want to experience it. So I guess like that is one other thing that I would probably like add to that list, or probably like suggest to that list. because we also, I mean, I also, I'm also vegan, so I don't eat like any meat. So when I say like pain is pain for anyone,
Me too.
like no,
Thank you.
yeah. So that's a topic for another day. But again, I guess like what I'm saying is pain for any living creature. And having said that, I also like one last open.
Arvind, sorry, that's it. Maybe you can say more later.
Really, like I'm getting a lot of DMs from people asking people to limit comments to shorter time periods. Just raise your hand again. Like I'm welcome to have people speak multiple times. I know that there's a long list, but if everybody speaks for less time, then you'll all get a chance to speak more often. So just try to keep comments to a little bit shorter and make a quick pithy point, and then let's go to the next. I do just want to comment, Reddy, that even if God exists, you kind of made an implication that if God existed, that his perspective would be clearly shown to the world. And even if God exists, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be misunderstanding about him. So I don't think that because there's misunderstanding about God, that necessarily means God doesn't exist. And if you want to see my reason for believing in God, you should start with my essay on free will, which is in the online community. And I would welcome if you read the essay on free will and you find that it holds water. I can explain to you why I think there's a pretty good argument, a logical argument that God exists, if you're interested in that. With that said, I don't want to cover that tonight because that's a whole nother like ball of wax and can of worms. So David Sternman.
Right. I'm trying to figure out, we're not talking about morality, we're not talking about God. So it's sort of weird to know what to talk about here. But I'd say one thing I want to bring up is the value in listening to each other in order to learn from each other. That one of the difficult things nowadays is to be able to use God language. So for the sake of being able to use God language, because that's it can be a very quick way to say things and effective, but it's repulsive to people who have to constantly fight because of atheism or agnosticism against it. So I'd like to say that we should open up a little to that kind of language by understanding how it works. Literalism is for 5-year-olds. You know, quoting the Bible is stupidity, but there are lessons there in the same words that are embedded in the words. If you're not a literalist reading it, it's written so that children can understand at a very basic level. Let's not get stuck at that level, okay? So the difficulty has to do with metaphoric language and thought, but understand science has the same problem. The model of the thing is not the thing. When we talk about electrons as dots, and you know, they work as billiard balls in certain cases, that's part of our understanding. It's not the literal. You can't stay at that literal level to really understand physics, right? Same thing with God language. So as someone said, Rama said, God, you have to realize we're dealing with a concept, and we're not examining that today. Okay, so I won't talk about sort of, it's subtle to talk about, but you talked about what religion is, and I think you're short selling a little bit, that it doesn't have to be a set of beliefs about the cause of nature, but a willingness to discuss things that are not purely material and physical. So it may be a commitment to examining beliefs and discussing insights with disagreements in the community. For example, Talmud is a constant argument. There's someone on both sides all the time. So you have to understand disagreement and belief that has two sides to it, and the agreement to argue over things and to see both sides. That also is religion. It doesn't give you much to grab onto, but there's an agreement that you'll respect that process. So there's a social binding in being able to confront things as a group. And I would say that confrontation that makes it maybe religious is that it's not merely about nature and the physical, it's about something else. And that's where these words from the God language that upset people come in. The divine, the infinite, the supernatural, the ultimate, the absolute. So preserving these things culturally and teaching about them and having a social order in your community that supports that with a non-void sense of we'll do things to make it practical. We'll have actions that say we're doing this to support each other. So that's called ritual sometimes. With or without that, Hegel says using symbols that are concrete to point beyond is part of that. And I think these are other ideas about religion that make it more accessible to people, and we're trying to do that. So I just want to say it's what we're all trying to do here. Point towards a greater wisdom. So this is a question someone brought up earlier. How do we reflect onto these greater propositions, elevating some things to a higher level of authority, up to the level of what we would normally in science call objectivity, things that have a subjective component. You talked about Gödel, but dialectical issues about free will or not, these are as important as other questions about objectivity. So I'm trying to sum that up. So a discipline which says we will humble ourselves before this discussion, because we're discussing something greater than the issue of particles in an accelerator. We're discussing the greater powers in our life, the greater things that are essential to wisdom, and being deferential to that. That stance is important to practice, and yoga is a practice because you have to do it and do it and do it to be deep in it. So you can't dismiss religion if you don't have some experience in the depth of practice. Think about that. That's all.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think it's really important to, your point about being able to discuss the non-physical is a key part of religion. And I think a lot of atheists are, just simply don't acknowledge that such a thing could possibly exist. And I think it's good to entertain the possibility that they could. And if my argument on free will is correct, I actually logically show that they do. And so I think that's a great point. And as far as humility, there's a great book called Humility is the New Smart. So I'm going to fully agree with you that humility is how we learn. We only learn by being humble and learning new truths that show that we learn more than we currently know, rather than trying to prove our current beliefs right. So that said, I want to
maybe another way to look at it is in terms of modern philosophy, that having a community that confronts angst together, that we have possibilities we have to define as a community for ourselves and as individuals authentically, that could be called religious, that entire intent.
Yep, great. And I want to, because we're starting to get to almost 8:30, I want to let people that haven't spoken speak first. So I'm going to skip the line a little bit for some people that haven't gotten to speak yet. And
Garrett?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing. Ocean hasn't spoken yet. Wilson and Constance.
Yep. So we're going to go Ocean, then Wilson, then Constance next. And then go ahead, Ocean.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm definitely not an atheist. I believe in God, but not the God of love and righteousness. My view of God is one of the one who is the greatest mass murderer. God killed more people than Adolf Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong combined through natural disasters. So he's a mass murderer. And another attribute is the guy who's keep knocking up, impregnating countless naive girls and not taking care of their babies. Very irresponsible. And you accuse him, why would you do that? And his perfect excuse is, I'm giving all of my babies free will, so I don't have to take care. That's the nature of God. So I'm not an atheist. I firmly believe in God. And but I appreciate religion that keeps the safer, more pacified, orderly society. Otherwise, we're going to have the chaos. And I kind of disagree with what you said about law is there to increase the happiness and decreasing the harm. I think the law's purposes, again, is to just create the order, not the bloodbath in every street corner or the chaos. And it's kind of vague, it's extremely vague to say increased happiness. I think primary reasons people keep overtly seeking the happiness too much that we become so, where's my happiness? Where's my happiness? My husband doesn't give me happiness anymore. My girlfriend doesn't give me happiness anymore. As a result, we have most divorced society. Half the people get divorced. In California, 2 out of 3 get divorced. But if the happiness is not the primary reason to maintain the household, even though your husband is boring, your wife is not attractive anymore, if your happiness is the secondary, and if the nurturing the kids comes first, then seeking your own happiness, I think we can decrease the divorce rate. And secondly, people like Beethoven, or the true genius, I'm sure he is continuing to shine the humanity. At the same time, through the records, many of his colleagues felt like shit, because comparing to Beethoven's talent, most composers at his time felt like so inferior, emotionally harmed. So in order to not harm anybody else, Beethoven should compose less brilliant pieces? I don't think so. Those people are harmed, just so be it. So that's my thing. that's my thing. Thank you very much.
So Ocean, I'm gonna call your belief in God bluff and say, if you were right and God was evil and the biggest mass murderer, he'd go one level further and just torture us all eternally for fun. And none of us would even be living in this amazing world where we live in the healthiest, happiest world that has ever existed on earth. So I'm going to challenge your belief that God.
Yeah, thank you very much, Garrick. Thank you very much. And in response to that, yes, you can see that because we are living in the most affluent society, and you happen to be extremely lucky. We are less than 5% of the entire population. You're born to be the nice upper neighborhood of America. But in reality, 17,000 babies on the planet have been dying out of starvation every single day. In other words, 34,000 parents out there are crying the hell out of it because of their babies are dying every single day. 17,000 babies are dying out of it. And most people don't have, many people on the planet don't have electricity, clean water. As a result, they die very young. So yes, we are very exceptional. We are extremely lucky. And you can say we're living in great life, but we are the minority. Majority.
I'm talking about the whole world, Ocean. A person that lives in poverty today lives better than a medieval king did a couple thousand, like 1,000 years ago.
Yes.
So
yeah,
actually,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Ocean, the whole world has been getting better and better throughout time, and that's even for the poorest of the poor. If you look at the strata of society, everybody has been getting better over time, and so. All I'm saying is,
I agree with you.
If God was evil, Ocean, it wouldn't be getting better. It would be getting worse, and we would be being tortured eternally. Again, I don't
totally agree with you. I totally agree. Having said, it's easy for us to say it, but if you happen to be one of those 17,000 babies of parents, life is a hell. Or people who got killed. We killed more than innocent people, million innocent people in Iraq.
We're gonna move on.
Ocean, we can get back to you later. We're gonna go to Wilson and Constance.
Yeah, go ahead, Wilson.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I appreciate you gather everybody here, 40 plus people talking about God and atheism and agnosticism. And I would say that this is the most important decision anyone can make in their lives. That's my opinion. What is discussing here, what is being discussed, is the most important, I'm going to say, decision you can make in your life, period. The other thing I like to comment is the distinction that one of the people brought up right in the beginning of the session, and I can't find him anymore, so I'd like to, if he can raise his hand, where he testify how he found God, right? While he was bleeding, he was dying, and he found the presence of here you go, Mr. Daniel, man, thank you very much. And what he brought up is the following: God cannot be learned through a book or by thinking, by logic, unless you have a mystical experience with God himself. You really not gonna have, you cannot really say you're true religious. And that's what he had. Because once you have that mystical experience, nothing what people say or do is gonna change it for you, because you had that experience. So God is your mother and father. God is your children. God is your wife. You don't relate to people, your family, by rationalize. You relate with them through your heart, through love. Once you relate with somebody through love, logic becomes secondary. And that's how we should ideally relate to God, through love, right? That's why Jesus says that serve your God with your heart and your neighbor as yourself, right? So yeah, that's pretty much my distinction to the group. And again, thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilson. Appreciate that. And I do think this is an important subject, and we try to talk about important things at these Tuesday night events. And I'm glad you appreciate this one. Constance, I want to hear your perspective.
Okay, I apologize. I am at a McDonald's, so it might be loud. You asked at some point someone about what pure evil was. And my thing is, it's someone doing wrong with that they are, for example, domestic abuse in the case of someone with antisocial personality disorder. they know what they are doing is wrong. So technically, in some cases, love cannot conquer all. And you know the background behind what I am talking about.
Yeah, so there are definitely cases where people have, drastic misunderstandings, and antisocial personality disorder is something that can lead people to do very unethical things. But whether they're purely evil and doing unethical things simply to be evil because that is their intention or desire, I would argue those people are actually doing what they want to satisfy their ego, and they simply rationalize that there's no reason to not harm other people because I want what I want. And what they see as good is what they want, and they don't see harming other people as evil. So even those people, they don't see it as evil. They see it as, I'm doing what I want and I don't care what other people think, which is a misunderstanding, because that lack of respect for other people socially ends up causing them harm in the long run. And so that even is a misunderstanding, even with people with antisocial personality disorder. And I was coaching one, and they actually did understand and acknowledge that following the rules of society was in their best interest once they got punished enough for doing things that were unethical. So everybody can learn, and I would argue even those people are not truly pure evil. They just have an utter disregard for other people's harm.
So you're saying that they're narcissists pretty much, which I would definitely agree with you. They definitely are narcissistic. Highly narcissistic.
Well, they're two separate
thank you for
things.
answering that.
Yeah, two separate things, narcissism versus antisocial personality disorder. But
actually, they can wrap up and be in one.
You can be both. Me. People can be both, but they are two separate things. But
yes, they are two separate things.
Yeah. So that said, thanks, Constance. And now I'm going to go back into order, unless there was anyone else that hasn't. Is there anyone that has their hand up that hasn't spoken yet?
Let me see. I don't think James has spoken yet, or Davod, or
that's
Davod has spoken, and I haven't spoken.
Yeah,
okay,
that's right. I did say something briefly. So
go ahead, Michael, and then we'll try to keep comments short so that we can get through everyone's comments, and then we can come back to people for additional comments afterwards. So go ahead, Michael, if you haven't spoken.
James, okay.
James, have you not spoken either?
I have not spoken, no.
Okay, go ahead, James. You were before, just before Michael.
Okay, thank you. I really don't have that much to say. I do believe that religion is a diversion. So it's a diversion from life. It's a diversion from finding your own individuality, your own path in life. And it's a diversion from discussing morality. It's a diversion from paying attention to the important things. Religion that isn't just an innocent kind of binder of society. Religions tend to form themselves and not change. The Catholic Church and Islam are perhaps the most well-known examples, but I would add Hinduism to that too. The fact that the religions form and the people get involved in the religion and the societies don't change, seemingly become of the religions, is a fact. In other words, for the Christian religion to change, it had to become free. There had to become this Reformation movement, and in the Reformation movement became a high level of secularism, and the independence of individual churches and sects became more of an issue than the obedience to the original religion, which was created by the Catholic Church. All praise to them. And then before them, of course, the Jewish religion, which from out of which came the beginning of the idea of Scripture. The idea of Scripture, of course, is that we can get good ideas from books. We can actually read things, we can discuss things, we can learn things from others, and we can find a better way of living. And that has always been true. It was true in religion when they started. It is true in religions to a certain extent now. And it is, you know, in varying extents, you know, and to a great extent, and it is true in secular society where we can just go to a bookstore, we can pick a religious book or a non-religious book and learn a better way of living. So religion is my point is religion is a diversion from the main point. The main point is to live together well, develop a moral code, follow it, and not get stuck in a kind of I haven't heard the word yet today. So it's basically think for yourself, learn, and it's the same path that the religions followed, but we are free to follow it ourselves and to become more perfect human beings in much freer societies than the societies that were actually dominated by religious religious ideology.
Yeah, it sounds like, James, we're in agreement that religions were started to do exactly what you said, which is live a moral code and help people get along with each other, but that because of their inflexibility, sometimes they can end up causing harm rather than doing good. And that's why I say, like, listen to all religions with an open mind, where they have wisdom to teach, learn from it, but don't necessarily follow them blindly, because some don't adapt to the knowledge that comes into the world outside of those religions, and they stay kind of behind the times. So if I heard you right, and I hope I was paraphrasing you right, we largely agree.
Yeah, but the discussion of religion as important and necessary is a diversion from the important discussion, which is how do we get along? And right. that discussion has to be based on all the wisdom that's been accumulated all the way to the 21st century and is being created today. I saw a homeless person today, and it just lit me up. I said, because she looked aware, and she was like walking near the curb, and I don't know exactly for what reason, but the idea, is like, if there are people that are suffering and we're not connected to them, we need to become a more connected society, and we certainly aren't.
Yeah, I agree, James. And Michael, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I'm by no means certain whether there is or is not a God. It can't be proven, but I do absolutely believe in the sacred. I'm a dentist, and I remember when I was taking gross anatomy, physiology, embryology, biochemistry, the absolute perfection which the human body operates, the beauty, the intricacy, and then on a higher level, how we function intellectually and emotionally. I think that makes each and every one of us sacred. And I extend that to all sentient animals as well. And I think the fact that we and our cohabitants on this earth are sacred gives us a certain moral responsibility to treat each other in certain ways. And to reiterate what others have been saying, I think certain aspects of religion can give us guidance in that, irrespective of ritual and scripture. And if we can find that guidance in order to respect the sacredness in each and every one of us, we are practicing the best parts of religion. And that's the entirety of what I wanted to say.
It's very well said, Michael. And I agree with you largely. The one point is I would challenge you to read the essay on free will, because if you find that holds water, I'm going to try to logically show you that there is a logical reason to believe in a God. But I agree with you that sort of sentience and what I call the ability to make non-deterministic decisions is what should be sacred. And we did a discussion on abortion, and I made the argument that a fetus doesn't actually make non-deterministic decisions until the third trimester. And so that's the point at which, you're actually killing a living, sentient being. And so that was an interesting conversation. I don't want to delve into that, but I want to let other people go and really appreciate what you said, Michael. Very, very good points. Ellis, you had your hand up?
Oh, yes, that was beautiful. And I think Will hasn't gone yet. And then I think we'll go back to the list after.
Great. Thank you, Ellis. Will, go ahead.
Thank you. I started out, I asked the teacher just on the subject of God and belief at about age 9 or 10 in a non-religious school. We had religious instruction once a week for 1 hour. And I asked the teacher, "Excuse me, miss, who created God?" And she said, "Sit down and shut up. We don't ask that question." And ever since then, I sort of, I thought, I've been of the inclination that there are things beyond our human comprehension. And I became a very atheistic. I just inhaled everything Richard Dawkins wrote or said. I sort of worshipped Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist. And but then one day I just contemplated more this sort of notion that something came from nothing, or it existed infinitely without first cause. And I sort of just dawned on me that, as much as I firmly believe there's no omnipotent being that cares one iota for human affairs, it's so easily demonstrated because the amount of suffering on earth is immeasurable. I was in an old people's home yesterday visiting a neighbor who's got dementia, and he's in the dementia ward of the aged care facility, and they were fighting these like 80 and 90-year-olds like children. They'd reverted to infantile regress, and they were sort of fighting like children, and it was so sad. And when I left, I thought, well, where's God in all this, and all the other suffering in the world and the suffering in the natural realm? In my opinion, I'll wind up, but there's about 150 million species of biological organisms on Earth. We're just another one. Quite clearly, we're just another one. Our prefrontal cortex has developed to the point where we can comprehend our own existence, and it blows us away, and we come up with all sorts of elaborate, sophisticated understandings of why we're here, including hallucinations and possible revelations, I believe. However, having said that, I'm pretty much on the fence that there are things that we cannot comprehend. We are just another aspect of nature. If there's any sort of God, it's in nature. It's as much as it is in us as it is in a bird in a tree, or the flowering of the tree on which it sits. And it's in the miracle of DNA. And I think we just can't explain so much. And that's my end of my Looney Tunes rant. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Will. And actually that you alluded to the problem of evil, which was first introduced, from what I know, from Epicurus back in ancient Greece, about, well, if God is omnipotent and benevolent, why is there evil in the world? And I think it's a pretty good argument that omnipotent, benevolent God doesn't exist. And I didn't make the clarification that when I say that I can logically defend that a God exists, it's not omnipotent, benevolent God. I think that the Epicurus did a good job of showing he doesn't exist. But I do think that given that the world is moving in a positive direction, if there is a God, which I can logically defend some idea of a God, I think that he's on the right side in terms of making the world a better place. That said, if you want to hear that argument, we'll read the essay on free will. And if you agree with that, then I can take you to the next step of why I think that it logically can defend the idea of a higher power, or, God is what I use as the term to defend, to explain it. That said, I want to let.
I would like to read your essay on. We've had this discussion before that the universe existed infinitely. You believe, or is that in the Discord? That's in the Discord.
That is in Discord in the reference channel. That's a separate one. That's the one on the origins of the universe.
Yeah.
The one about God is about free will. It starts with free will and then moves on from there. But the so they're both separate topics.
Hi, this is Alice. We're at 1:45 now. So anybody who hasn't spoken, now's the time to put up your hand. And I think Garrett, maybe you could mention a bit about next week as well, or you could do that later when you close.
Yeah. let me pull that up, and I'm going to let Courtney go next, and then I'll pull up something after Courtney about next week's event.
Thanks, Garrett. So when I said that if you believe in things which can demonstrably be proven false, the question I asked, is that a good way to believe? I mean, you've taken it to a level where I don't believe you can take anything good from religion. I mean, sure, you can take good things from religion, but is it reliable? Absolutely not. And I also think that you discount the maliciousness with which religion is used to control the masses. I mean, some people have touched on it, but it's been handled with kid gloves. Religion is something that's used to galvanize society for war. Religion has been used to justify genocide. Religion has been used to justify slavery. Religion's been used in all manner and all kinds of contexts to impede the progress of mankind. And the reason why it is so dastardly is because it isn't backed by any kind of validated information. The reason why an atheist doesn't believe in God is because there's no evidence for God. So to say that you can get good things from religion, sure, you can get good things from religion, but my real question is that wise? Are religions wise to keep around, given their track record? I think.
So Courtney, I gave the examples of the Inquisition and wars waged in the name of Buddhism. So I did try to, acknowledge that religion has been used to do a lot of evil. And I agree with you, it has. All I'm saying is that there is also wisdom to be gleaned from religion. And it sounds to me like, you're not disagreeing with that, if I'm right, that there is wisdom to be learned from religion.
It's not that I think you can't get anything good out of religion. I mean, sure, you can get good things out of religion. I just question it, as a valid source of information, because you cannot verify religious belief. You can only have faith in it. And that's my only gripe with it. I mean, yeah, you can get good things from it. But just because a broken clock is right twice a day doesn't mean you shouldn't fix the clock, though.
So you're saying that religion might teach useful things that you resonate with you and you believe are true, but because they come from a religious source, you're not going to believe them anyway, because anything that comes from a religious source is unverifiable, even if you consider it axiomatic truth?
No, I would believe it if it worked for me, but I would be vulnerable to misinterpretation down the road because it's not based on reliable information. Like, I'm not saying that you can't take something good from a religion. I'm just saying it's not based in anything true, and that makes it vulnerable. It's a liable piece of information. It's not based in fact or anything.
So you don't think that there are any axiomatic truths that come from religion?
Well, I mean, now you're getting into a debate about, like, is religion capable of being an objective morality? Like, I guess if religion is able to give us axiomatic truths, then we should just say that it could be capable of giving us a form of objective morality, which I do not agree with. But
that's a big jump from what I said. I'm just saying, are there any axioms? Like, is the idea of, compassion a good concept to follow, right? Like, would you say that you should never follow compassion because compassion is taught by Christianity and therefore has a religious source and is unvalidatable, therefore we should never follow compassion?
I would say that axiomatic truths about compassion can be gained from outside of the Christian religion. Like, you can learn that it's better to be compassionate to people without having to be told unfounded stories about being compassionate.
So you're saying that you will never use a religious source for wisdom, period. Is that that's what I tried to ask if you were saying earlier and you didn't want to agree to that?
So I guess I have used religious sources as, I've taken advice from religious sources before, but I don't trust religious sources now. I don't really fare too well if somebody used the term God language. I don't really fare too well around that type of language because, yeah, I think it is basically unfounded. And I think there are other ways of teaching people moral behavior without teaching them unfounded stories.
Yeah, and that's where I introduced, Jeremy Bentham's utilitarianism, which I think actually essentially summarizes more or less like what all religions have been teaching for millennia, right? Which is increase happiness, which, by the way, someone else criticized, I think it was Ocean, criticized the idea of happiness. All I mean by happiness is the satisfaction one gets from achieving one's goals, which showed that even Ocean's counterexample to happiness, which is raising your children the correct way. If your goal is to raise your children the correct way, then you get happiness from that. Happiness doesn't cause divorces. What causes divorces is disappointment and not having the right goals. But that said, I want to let the next person go. And so Shane Marie.
Thank you. I'll try to be quick. I'm just, for me, what's disconcerting, and I think it happens across the board, whether it's respect to religion or politics, is that we elevate our argument by anchoring to the lowest common denominator of the side that we oppose, which I think is deeply unfortunate. Like, we have to raise our argument to the highest common denominator. And then if we still find no value, then that's fine. But it's so easy to anchor to the lowest common denominator and find no value in it. And we're doing ourselves nothing of justice in that. I feel like we've really got to aim for the highest of wisdom that's available there, look for the brightest of minds in any arena, and then decide that it has no merit. But only then can we make the claim that we've really turned that rock over and we've just, done our best to make the sense of the wisdom that's potentially available to us just for ourselves, for selfish reasons. Then I would also argue, so, and this is off subject, I know, but there is a biological distillation of love, right? And so we could make argument that there is a biological reason for love, right? But if you've been in a long-term relationship, and even if you're an atheist, you would find that it's probably better to not distill it in that way, to allow it to be magical or whatever it is, even if you recognize that there might be biology that drives that relationship, but we allow for that. I think whether there's truth or not, and whether there's a God or not, that we have to be careful in distilling everything. Like, I just don't think that's a good angle. Even if there's truth, even if we know for a fact that love can be biologically distilled, there's something of benefit to allowing for the magic to surface in that, and to hold open to something else. I don't know what that is. I just think we need to be really careful in that, even if that's the absolute truth.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, Shane Marie, that we need to take the best wisdom from all sources and not strawman perspectives that don't agree with our confirmation bias. And I think people, I want to strongly encourage everyone to be really aware that psychologically all humans are very strongly rooted in wanting to believe we're right about what we believe now. But the only way we learn new truths is to listen with an open mind to new ideas that might hold merit, and acknowledge when they have a better solution than what we currently think is right. And I think that's, Shane Marie, if I understood you right, that's what you were saying with the first part. And it's, don't strawman, perspectives that you don't agree with their worst arguments and show why you should never believe them because of their worst arguments. Take their best arguments and see if you can learn from them. That is how we all learn and how we rise up to be better than we are today, tomorrow. And so yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to get across in the presentation portion. So thank you, Shane Marie, and sounds like we vehemently agree. David.
Oh, okay. One small point I wanted to start off with is, it seems like we mix up infinite and eternal, which are two quite different things. Infinite is a sort of a volume thing, and eternal is a time-based thing. And I think some people think eternal and infinite mean the same thing, and they don't. Eternal means things have always existed. Infinite means there's an incredible volume, unending volume of what exists. That's just a small point, but I thought I'd mention it. But really what I wanted to address, Ocean mentioned evil. And he said, if there was really a very evil God, he would have all of us in hell. But actually,
I said
if you
that
really
actually.
want to, well, if you really want to torture somebody, you actually have them being tortured, knowing and have them know that other people are having a great life, because it's much, if everyone's in hell equally tortured, you know, you look at your neighbor and you say, well, okay, we're all in this together, the same kind of thing. Whereas if you are being tortured and you know there's people, you can see them, you know, having a great life, I would suggest that psychologically, that's much more torturous. As far as mystical experiences, again, I personally look at it from a psychological standpoint. I think, you know, people, when they tend to have mystical experiences when they're either half conscious or unconscious, or, you know, in an extreme psychological state, or just waking up or just falling asleep and seeing ghosts. To me, that's more of an explanation than any other that I know of. The final point I wanted to raise, because I'm doing this pretty quickly, is I think the default position is there's a physical world, and then the position that has to be supported is the idea that there's more than a physical world. I think almost everyone, not everyone perhaps, but almost everyone agrees, yes, there's a physical world. So the debate really is there more than just the physical world? And I think, excuse me, this is where science comes in, and this is where people say, well, where's the evidence? And to somebody who wants a reasonable amount of evidence before they believe something, you know, a reasonable amount of support, as it's called in science, you know, unless you can show there's a reasonable amount of support for something supernatural, you know, the default position, like I was just born here. I didn't come with a handbook. Nobody told me anything about how this whole thing works. So I just look at, okay, what's the most obvious thing that's happening? You know, and the physical world, I don't have a lot of problem with that existing. But I do have a problem with the supernatural. And then I include in the supernatural the ability to have free will, because how does that work if we're all physical? And I also, you know, I included in the supernatural these ideas of omnipotent beings who created the universe and that kind of thing. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks. David, you know, I don't want to try to, like, I do want to pick your brain in the online community, if you can join it, about why you think that being in, you know, an extremely high level of pain and in solitude would be better than, or would be better than life as you experience it on Earth, from whatever perspective a person is on Earth. I would argue even the poorest people on Earth are better off than being in huge amounts of pain and solitude. And so I can easily imagine a much worse perspective if God were evil.
Actually, that's interesting you should say that, Garrett, because actually, if you've read about people who are in that situation, it rapidly, well, they lose consciousness and die psychologically, not physically. It's actually hard to have somebody in the state you're describing for any length of time.
But if God was omnipotent and evil, he could do it, right?
I would, well, okay, you're arguing against human psychology, because human psychology.
No, I'm arguing that if God was omnipotent and evil, he could imagine something worse than life on Earth. That's all I'm saying. And again, okay. I don't want to debate it, David, because we're at the end of the evening, but you know, let's acknowledge, you know, if you want to try to come up with a counter argument, let's do it in the online community. But I find that hard to believe that life on Earth is as bad as it could possibly be. So that said, as far as the argument of more than a physical world needing to be defended, I would love to hear your counter arguments to my argument for free will in the online community as well. But again, we don't have time for that now. It's 9 o'clock and I want to I think Jeffrey hasn't spoken. So I want to get to that. I do want to quickly address that there is kind of a handbook given to us on Earth, and that is the ability to reason and the ability to know what's fair and unfair. And I would argue we're all born with the ability to reason and the ability to know what's fair and unfair. And we get confused about it over time and as we learn in life, but I think we're all born with both of those abilities. So I do think we're given a handbook when we were born into this world, Earth, not a paper handbook, but a sort of an innate one. So that said, I do want to quickly mention that, let's stop with hands if we could. I'm going to let Jeffrey go, and then maybe if you guys can keep comments really short, because we're at a little after 9 o'clock and I gotta close out pretty soon.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is going to be record short. Interesting format here. I just want to know, where can one find this essay on free will, and what's this online community you're talking about?
Oh, so Ellis, can you post the link to the online community?
Jeffrey, I put the free will essay in the chat. I'll put it again, and I'll add the online community connection as well.
On the chat? Okay.
Yeah, in the Discord, in the Zoom chat.
Okay, fine. Okay, I'm done.
Great, thanks, Jeffrey. Appreciate it, and I would love your feedback on the essay on free will. Speaking of will, so sorry, I couldn't help it.
Free will. I'm all for freeing will. Absolutely. And so the key to that is to be in the flow, I think. I'm just reading the book Flow, which is anybody interested in that. It's a top, really good read, Flow. Anyway, that was a segue to promote that book. I was just going to say, Garrett, it strikes me every time you refer to God, it says he, God is he. And this is another example of how ludicrous the whole thing is. I mean, I can't understand why women just cop that. They wouldn't say, well, if there is a God, surely it would be female, because a female gives birth to everything. Yet it's just an example that God was cooked up by a bunch of blokes sitting around a campfire in the desert a few thousand years ago, and a way of just enforcing their patriarchal view of the world and controlling females. Will say, well, God is a bloke, you all live in sin, do what he says, or you're going to burn in hell for eternity. That's the Abrahamic view. And we're so brainwashed. People don't question things, generally speaking, present company excluded. They just go, oh yeah, God's a bloke, so God's got a gender. Has he? God has a penis, does he? God is a man, or is a male and has a gender. Like, it's just, we cannot comprehend the reality that we're in. We're doing our best as intelligent apes. We've got no idea. If we had any idea, we wouldn't be on the border of destruction. We've got as many wars going on pretty much now as were happening 3,000 years ago. We've got no idea what we're doing. We're just intelligent apes. If you want proof of that, look at an anatomy drawing of a human being's skeleton and just have a look at the tailbone, the vestiges of when we were swinging from the trees 170 million years ago. Nothing much has changed. Thanks.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Will. I don't think God is male. I don't think God has a sex. I don't really know, but I just use the word, the nomenclature he to refer to God because it's traditionally how it's used, but it's not because I think God is male. That said, go ahead, David Sternman, and I'm sorry, Jeffrey, did you not put your hand down? David, go ahead.
Excuse me. No, I didn't.
Jeffrey, do you want to go?
No. I'm trying to put my hand down. That's all.
No problem. So go ahead, David.
So yeah, I just want to say this idea that it's Abrahamic to burn in hell is completely a misunderstanding. Seems to me we don't know what we're talking about if we say that. It's really a misguided thing that I've ever heard. I'm Jewish. I never heard of burning in hell ever until I heard about Christianity. And the idea that English is male-based is just a matter of dealing with our own cultural linguistic limitations. It's not a conceptual thing. God's not a male or a female or anything like that. I mean, that's why you look at the words of the Bible and you say, oh, it says we'll create them in our image, and you say, oh, male and female, it's like all the same, because we're talking about something else other than the physical. This is what I started the very discussion saying, it's not about the material reality, it's about higher values and concepts. So we have trouble talking at that level because we denigrate religion because of maybe bad personal experiences or reading about it, not understanding what some religions are doing and trying to do. Just like looking at science from afar, you can really get the wrong idea about it. You think it's just about burning oil and all the things that we have engineered and not understand that there's something more to it, a higher value. So, that we're just intelligent apes. There's a literal truth to that, but it misses the idea that self-consciousness is fundamentally, infinitely different from consciousness. And that's what gives us freedom, that we can reflect on ourselves in time. And that gives us an infinitely greater perspective about what the world is and how it's made up. That's a worthy discussion, I think. So I just, in terms of stating my point, which is what's the value of like any religion in the first place, which involves getting together, talking to other people, reflecting on beliefs, having a ritual way of doing that, that I think for us to learn, we need rituals. We need to have a time we read a book. We sit down and read a book, or have a time we sit down and practice our piano or our instrument or our craft. We have to have these rituals. Whether we go to a chemistry lab, whether we learn mathematics, yoga, gymnastics, whatever it is, we have to practice them ritually to become good at them. And this involves self-reflection too. And I want to say that's spirituality. You know, if we value that, that religion is the path to, one of the paths to spirituality by constant self-reflection with a group and group consciousness, not exclusive hive consciousness, but group consciousness is a higher level of existing. You realize that you're part of a nexus, a society. It opens up possibilities you don't otherwise have access to. So, you know, theoretically, we can understand we're social. Actually, to be social is something worth practicing and seeing how it works. Because leadership is not something, for example, you learn by looking at a book. Leadership is something you learn interacting with people. It's that we talked about the level of parables and sensuous and practical, physical, material examples, not just, here's my concept, now you all understand, do what I'm doing. No, not even in the military. You know, you have to teach at the very physical level to get to higher levels. You have to repeat that. And religion is the practice, some religions, I think, attempt to be the practice of making that a reaching to a higher value. So talking about the infinite shouldn't be repulsive. And I don't want to talk about infinity with a non-mathematician because we get all kinds of, I mean, I'll talk about it, but it's going to be a waste of time. Talking about God with someone who doesn't work on the concept is a waste of time. They can come up with their own way of talking about things, but God's a quick way to talk about them. Infinity, there's no infinity in nature, but it's a really useful tool for talking about mathematics. That's all.
Thanks, David. And I do need to close out here. I want to, sorry, Will, let's continue in the online community, but I am absolutely exhausted. So I just want to give a quick reminder that next week we're going to talk about how to be a happy, influential person, positively impacting people around you. And we want to help make that, you know, that sort of seeking of wisdom available to people that are not a part of a religion or that are part of a religion through our community as well, where we help each other learn from each other, where we're all teachers and learners, and we help sort of create wisdom amongst each other, where we can share whatever we want and we buy into whatever we want, but just an open exchange of information and sort of helping each other be the best version of ourselves, seek truth, and to be fair. And if those things sound like good things to strive for and you want a group of people to strive for it, toward it with, then I strongly encourage you to come next week, because that's going to be the subject of the evening. And we'll talk about how to get more involved for those that want to. And then the week after that, we're going to talk about politeness and respectfulness, which is the only rule of the Freethinker Institute. There were a few deviations. I guess I take that to sort of an extreme level of like not trying to like present other people's perspectives as dumb or stupid, or, you know, like not using sort of negative terms to describe other people's perspectives, with the idea that, you know, we may say, I find it very unlikely that this is true. Sure, that's fair game. Saying someone is dumb for believing that is sort of an attack on someone for having that belief. And I don't want people to feel attacked for any belief. I can say, like, I think it's very unlikely that Earth is flat, right? But I'm not going to say flat earthers are dumb for thinking that Earth is flat. I'm just going to say it's very unlikely that Earth is flat. And here are the reasons that I think that. Again, with the idea of being respectful to all people's beliefs, no matter where they're coming from, knowing and keeping in mind that when you make fun of someone's beliefs, they're less likely to agree with you and believe you. So that's kind of why I take that. But let's talk more about that in 2 weeks, and people can disagree with me then. I see some skepticism, so come back in 2 weeks and disagree with me then, because I don't have time to do it now. I woke up really early this morning, but I do want to thank everybody for coming, for the great conversation, the great comments from everybody. including those not only that agreed with me, but those that disagreed. And thank you for sharing your perspective as well. It's only by sharing different perspectives that we can all come to a better version of truth for ourselves. And that's really what this community is about, is helping everybody come to the version of being the best version of themselves, seeking truth and being fair that they can. And hopefully those sound like reasonable things to go after. And I want to thank everyone for their contributions to each other and to the group as a whole. So thank you all. Hope you all have a great night and hope to see you all next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everybody.